Hi everyone, my name is Neha and welcome to my channel. I wanted to make this video because this is the exact time last year that I was high-key stressing about going to university abroad. And so if you're in my position and you're considering going abroad or you're just stressing about university, then keep on watching this video because today we're going to be talking about my experience as an international student at the University of Edinburgh. So I just wanted to start by giving a small introduction about myself and also just outlining what the video is going to look like. My name is Neha and I'm going into year 2 at the University of Edinburgh in Law and International Relations. I'm an American, so I'm an international student, and I grew up in an international school where a lot of kids around me were applying to the UK, and at that time I had only ever considered going to the US. But I was like, what's one more application? And it wasn't until I got the replies back when I started to look into Edinburgh and I realized I really liked it as a school. Basically from this video, I'm kind of just encouraging anyone who thinks that they want to come to the UK and who wants to specifically come to the University of Edinburgh to sort of look into it. As an international student, my experience has been really good. And I'm sort of just gonna take different aspects of like university life that I have experienced, and I'll leave the timestamps below, so if you guys want to know more about a certain aspect, you guys can go ahead and skip to that time. But I'm basically just gonna talk about different university aspects and sort of compare what I know about them in the US to what I know about them in the UK, and also just my specific experience at the University of Edinburgh around those different aspects. Edinburgh in particular does have a lot of international kids. The undergraduate population is about 25,000 kids, and of those, 8,000 of them are international. I think this really adds to the diversity and the excitement of the university, and for me in particular, as someone who grew up in an international school and has a much easier time making friends with people who also have that same background, I think it made university really comfortable and exciting to meet people that sort of have that same background and be able to relate in that way. So I really enjoyed that aspect of the University of Edinburgh in particular. I think that's one of the reasons why I chose it in the first place, just because I think it's so much easier to make friends with people, especially in such a new environment, when you can share experiences with them. I also just want to go ahead and talk about what my personal adjustment period was like. I think something that specifically I wanted to know about before I came to university is like, what is your personal adjustment period like as an international student? Because I didn't visit the city of Edinburgh, so I was particularly worried about like how long is it going to take me to adjust to a completely new environment and a completely new city. My personal adjustment period to the city was not long at all. Like, as I said before, I had never visited it, but even then, as soon as I got there, I literally just fell in love with the city. And even for a city university, I would say that all of my classes were kind of centered around one location, and so it was really easy to sort of just navigate. I think that it's a really student-friendly city, and so it was never overwhelming in a sense, and it was something that I adjusted to really quickly. My adjustment period for sort of just getting used to university life was slightly harder. Getting used to just having to adult did take definitely a lot longer than just getting used to the city itself. Especially because I didn't expect to be in self-catered halls. I had signed up for Pollock halls. I don't know why they put me in self-catered halls. I don't really think that that's the norm, but it made me really nervous, and it definitely did take a little bit of time for me to like learn how to cook and do all of those things by myself. Something that I think you guys will recognize as I continue to talk about the different aspects of university life is that the UK system in general, I think, does expect students to be a lot more self-sufficient than the US system does, especially just in first year. And so sort of just adjusting to the idea of doing things on my own and being self-sufficient definitely took longer than adjusting to the city. But then again, it's something that I was really nervous about before I left. Like when I got put into my self-catered hall, I was like, oh my God, how am I gonna do this? But when you end up in that scenario and you actually get put into that scenario without any other choice, you adjust a lot faster than you think you're going to. So even then, it took me like a couple of weeks, but then I was like totally fine, and I loved staying in self-catered halls, honestly. Okay, so now I'm gonna get into like different aspects about university life and my experience with them, and sort of just like compare them to what I know about the US system, just so I can talk about sort of the international experience in particular and what it's like as an American to go through like the UK university process. I would say that overall Freshers Week in the US is definitely a lot more guided than it is here in the UK. In both cases, I think that the university definitely puts out a lot of different events, but after speaking to my friends in the US, I can tell that orientation week there definitely has a little bit more structure, because how it worked for them is that they got split up into different groups. The university assigned them into different groups so that they could kind of go through the orientation week with people from their course or in their accommodation. And they also got given an advisor, and they go through Freshers Week or orientation week with that group. And so it's a little bit more structured. I think the impression that I got from Freshers Week in the US is that it's definitely a lot more like informative, I would say. They had like presentations on campus safety and like financial responsibility, which aren't really events that I went to in the UK. And also just overall, I think in the UK, it's a lot more of a social thing. And I think another massive difference that also kind of shows that it's more of a social thing in the UK is the fact that you're legal to drink here. So the universities can put on night events which include alcohol. Freshers Week for me was a bit sad, honestly. I think I did it completely wrong because I lived with my parents for like the first 4 days of Freshers, and I didn't even move into my accommodation until the 4th day, so I didn't make any friends there for like the first few days. I also think that like the big student events that are held at night were slightly overwhelming, and that might just be because I literally did not know anyone, so I didn't go with anyone, but like it was held in this big student union, and I literally just walked in and I was just so overwhelmed because I didn't know anybody and I hadn't gone with anybody, and so those were slightly more intimidating for me. But I will say that the smaller events, like the ones that were held at my accommodation that I went to like on the 5th day, were really, really fun because there was like no pressure. They were really casual. You just like had snacks and you just like kind of talked with the people that were in your accommodation, and that's actually where I met like 2 of my best friends that I'm living with next year. So for me, the smaller events were really, really fun, and the bigger events were like slightly more intimidating, I would say. I would say Freshers Week like isn't the best week of your life. Don't worry. For a lot of people, it's really fun because it's like the first time that you're kind of like away from your parents. You get to like do whatever you want. But for other people, that can be very overwhelming. And for me personally, it was kind of intimidating until I met like my best friends. By the end of Freshers, it was great. But for like the first 5 days, it was really hard, honestly. So aside from like the social events, we also had quite a few informative ones as well. One of the ones that we had was like an activities fair where they basically just had all of the booths, like all of the activities that we have at the university, which is a ton, by the way. I'll talk more about it in the next section. And you could kind of just like walk around, sign up for whatever you wanted, honestly. And that was really informative. And I think another one that really helped was the classes fair, which had booths from all the different classes before you signed up for your classes, and you could walk around, you could ask questions from like second years and stuff to kind of decide what classes you wanted to take. So as I just mentioned before, in order to like sign up for activities, we had an activities fair, and from like speaking to my friends in the US, I can tell that that's kind of like the norm for everywhere, honestly, for us and for them, where you kind of just have like a big event where like all the clubs are present and you kind of just like talk to whoever you want, and then you can sign up for whichever ones you want, and then you have a grace period of 2 weeks in order to go to the clubs and decide what you actually want to join for the entirety of the semester. And that, I think, again, is just the norm for US colleges and for UK universities. The range at clubs at Edinburgh, I think, is something that they do so well. We have like 300 plus clubs, ranging from like political to cultural to sports, like academic. There's like literally, there's so much to choose from. In freshman year, I joined mostly like academic clubs just because that's really what I wanted to get into. So I joined Edinburgh Political Union, and I joined the Edinburgh Economic Society. If you're worried about making friends, joining clubs is like a great way to do that. I know so many people whose like great friends come from clubs because not only do you learn things, you also get to just immediately have that connection of sharing the same interest. Overall, I think that there's like some really significant differences between the academic systems in the UK versus the academic systems in the US. The first major difference, I think, is the idea of specialized study versus focused study. In the US, many schools that I know of are like heavily focused around their core curriculum and the idea that like kids should have knowledge in multiple different sectors. And in terms of classes in the US, there are requirements for the classes that you have to do, and you have to take classes in different fields. You don't even have to decide a major right away. You can be undecided, but for most schools that I know of, even if you are like a history major, you still have to take different classes in things like science and math. The UK though is really different. You don't just apply to the school, you apply specifically to the degree. And when you're researching schools and stuff, you don't just research what schools are good, you research specifically what schools are good for your degree. And it's much more focused in that way. Another major difference is the way that exams and your final grade is formatted. In the US, your final grade is often based on a combination of multiple different assignments that you do throughout the semester. But in the UK, most of the times, a majority or even 100% of your grade will be based on your final exam. I like Edinburgh University specifically because I think, in my opinion, the academic system at Edinburgh is sort of like a combination of the UK and US systems. There's a lot more flexibility, I would say, than other UK universities. You still have to apply to a major just like other UK universities, and for the first 2 years you take compulsory courses in your major, but in those 2 years you also get a lot of optional credits where you can choose courses from whatever school you want. Like if I'm in the School of Law or School of Political Sciences, in my optional courses I can still take classes from like the School of Engineering. You also do have the flexibility to change your degree in the first years, which is not really something that I've heard that you can do in other UK universities. I actually switched my degree this summer. So I used to be in international relations and now I'm in law and international relations. So I not only switched my degree, I also fully changed from the School of Political Sciences or Social Sciences to the School of Law. I like that flexibility at Edinburgh because I think it's good for people that know what area they want to go into, but not specifically like the subject they want to do. And I think that's one of the reasons why I even chose Edinburgh in the first place, because I knew that I never wanted to take a math class ever again, and I knew that I wanted to do humanities. And I really couldn't wrap my head around going to like a US university and having to take multiple different classes from other sectors. And I think that's definitely good, that has its own perks, but I think for me, someone that knew what I wanted to do and definitely knew that I wasn't going to change that depending on whatever classes I took, I think Edinburgh was a really good thing for me. In terms of exams, Edinburgh is pretty standard like as other UK universities. Most of my classes were either 50% to 100% based on the final exam. I think this specifically was something that was really hard for me personally to adjust to. You literally have to like self-administer and you have to push yourself not to procrastinate, but it's a really good skill to learn for the future. I think when you're deciding to choose between something like the UK and the US, this has to be a really important consideration because you have to decide what suits you the best. If you think that specialized study is better for you and you can self-administer and decide when to work on your own time and do that well, then I think the UK is a good choice. Something that I think is really key to the freshman experience in the US is living in catered halls and with other roommates. It's really not common to live by yourself in first year in the US, and most kids are on some sort of meal plan where all their meals are accommodated for and they live in catered halls. In the UK though, it's really not common to share your room with someone else. So you live by yourself, and it's a lot more common to live in self-catered accommodation rather than catered accommodation. We do have catered accommodation at Edinburgh. It's called Pollock Halls, and it's basically like a dorm style situation where it's similar to the US, but you don't share a room with anyone. So you have your own room. Some of them you can have your own bathroom, and then you all meet down in like sort of like mess hall area and like eat at the same time, or eat together, and like all the meals are provided. Pollock Halls at the University of Edinburgh has around 1,900 kids, so it's like clearly not the majority. Like I said before, I really did not expect to be put in self-catered. I did sign up for Pollock Halls, though again, I don't think that's the norm. Most kids that apply for Pollock Halls get it. My self-catered hall basically works like a flat. We shared it with like 5 other girls, and each person got their own room with their own wash basin, and we shared a kitchen, 2 toilets, and a shower. I think in terms of like what you should sign up for, and my 2 cents on that, I will say that it just depends on what you're comfortable with and what you think you can do in first year. I also will say that I'm known to be quite high maintenance, and I wasn't really expecting to live in a self-catered flat or to like share a bathroom, but I ended up being really happy with how the situation turned out. I really enjoyed it, and I think it's one of those things where like you kind of just gonna get whatever you get, and you will learn to be okay with it as you get put into that situation. Like I said before, it's something that once you get put into that situation, you'll learn to be comfortable with it. University is kind of just like about adjusting. So again, it's sign up for what you think you'll be okay with, and then just I guess, adjust depending on whatever you get. Some people choose Pollock because of like the social aspect of it, because it's kind of like a little like community, and you guys like eat in a really big hall, and a lot of people like do prees together and stuff like that. And from being in a self-catered flat and having a bunch of friends that lived in Pollock, I can definitely see the social aspect of it. In self-catered, I wasn't really friends with like anyone from my flat. They were all really sweet, but I was never like close friends with any of them. I think it just personally worked out for me because a lot of my best friends ended up being in different flats in that self-catered accommodation. But again, from having friends that lived in Pollock, I can see why it would be a lot easier to make friends there. I would say another point of comparison with the US is after first year, it's really normal in the US to continue to stay on campus, and most colleges that I know of have 3 or 4 years guaranteed housing, and a lot of kids do happen to stay on campus for all 4 years, whereas in the UK, that's like really not the norm. I know that I'm getting a flat next year with my friends, and most kids move out of university accommodation after first year. So I feel like this might be another really big point for people like trying to decide between US and UK, because again, it's quite a big difference because most US universities are campus universities. Most kids in the US like live on campus, and it's sort of like a bubble in a sense, which can be really comforting, especially in your first year. Edinburgh, on the other hand, is a full city university because all the uni buildings and all the accommodations are like spread around the city. But they do have campus areas where they'll have like a couple buildings concentrated at either the George Square campus or like King's Buildings campus. In terms of accommodation, I think that's definitely more spaced out than the university buildings are. Other than like Pollock Halls, which is a concentrated set of halls, all the other accommodations are really spaced around the city. So some can be really far away to campus, and some can be really close. So definitely consider that when you're looking into university accommodation, like how far is it from the campus that you're going to be at. Overall, I think there's definitely pros and cons to a city university versus a campus university. For me, I love that Edinburgh is a city university, mostly just because I love Edinburgh as a city. To me, it's like the perfect size city because it's a really vibrant city. There's like always something to do, but it's also small enough to remain comfortable, and there's a lot of students, so it's not like overwhelming in a sense. I think some people might also feel as though it's harder to make friends at a city university because it's not like there's a campus, so you might not see people around as regularly. But I feel like if you make an effort to reach out to people in your classes and join clubs, then it's a lot easier to make friends because it's people that you naturally see. Overall, I honestly loved my first year of Edinburgh experience. It's a place that became dear to me very quickly, and I've met some of my closest friends there, and I've learned a lot as well. I also wanted to say that while I did spend a lot of the video talking about the differences between the US systems and the UK system, I wasn't trying to like directly compare them or say that one's better than the other, because I think that they're both great, and it just depends on what you like and what you're looking for out of your university experience. I think there definitely are a lot of differences between the US and UK systems in all aspects of university life, but those differences for me, such as like specialized study and self-catered accommodation and city university, those are the aspects that make coming to the UK and coming abroad such an exciting and unique experience for me, because if both the systems were the same, then it wouldn't really matter where you chose. Before university, I think I was really quite sure that I always wanted to return to the US after university, but coming here and enjoying it so much has kind of made me change that path. So I really encourage anyone who is thinking or considering about coming to the UK, or specifically University of Edinburgh, to look more into it, because it has been such an exciting and rewarding experience for me so far. Make sure to leave any questions that you have in the comments down below, and I'll make sure to get to them. Bye!